In this tutorial, I'll show you how to create this voxel style letter F animation. You can work parametrically and easily update this to any other letter or number. I'm going to make my way through the letters and numbers that people want to see videos on, so let me know in the comments below if there are any you'd like to see in particular. Please remember to like and subscribe and you'll get notifications of when I upload new videos. Okay, let's get started. Right, let's start off by just bringing in a Mo text. And as I've used on all my other 36 days of type, I'm using the Big John font. So let's just open that up. That's just so they all kind of looked similar. Here we go. Okay, and I'm going to change that to letter F, and I'm going to make that a depth of 40. Okay, now the way we're going to make these cubes is actually using a MoGraph cloner, just a standard cloner, and then we're going to use some effectors to actually get the shape of the letter. So let's create our cloner, and then I'm going to create a cube, and I'm going to make the cube 10 by 10 by 10. I'm going to put a fillet on that of 2 and just leave that at 5 for the subdivision. Now we'll change this to a grid array, and the grid array I'm going to change to for the count, I'm going to change this to 10 by 20 by 3. Kind of looked at these settings already, and rather than endpoint, I'm going to say per step. I'm going to change this to 12 by 12 by 12. So that leaves us with this kind of grid of cubes with these gaps in between. And what I'll do is I want to line that up with the F so that the F is being covered. Okay, kind of want it central, because the way we're setting this up is so that we can swap out the F for other letters or numbers. We look from the side, let's just make this kind of central to that. Actually, we know the center of that because that's 40, we know that that's 20. Okay, so there's kind of our setup done. Now what we're going to do next is actually get a MoGraph plane effector with the cloner selected. Let's select plane, and for the parameter we're going to turn off position, going to change scale, uniform and absolute. We're going to change that to -1. Okay, so that just makes them all disappear for the minute. So what we're going to use is a fall off to make them visible where the F is. So to do that, we'll go to fall off, and what we're going to do is just drag in the MoText object into the fall off. And it gives us these two options, point object and MoGraph object. We actually want a point object. Now I'm using R20, so I think this is new to R20, so you can only really do this if you're in R20 or R21. So you can see that they're being affected in some way, but not quite in the way that we want. Okay, so if we just hide the MoText, and if we go and click on the plain object field, we can change some settings in here. So the first one we can do is under the layer tab, we'll change the mode from points to volume. And there you can see already our F is being cut out. Well, it's affecting in the way we wanted to, which was wherever the F is, it's making the parameter, the scale, -1. But we want it to do the opposite. And the way of doing that is by going back to the fall off, clicking on our object field, and under remapping we have this invert option. We're going to check that box, and that inverts it, so now we've got our F displayed and all the rest are invisible. Now the way they're lining up, because it uses the F to kind of decide exactly where it should show and where it should hide, I don't like the fact that this is so thick. I want this to kind of be about 3 wide, so I'm just going to slightly move the grid, so I've kind of got like a nicer setup. So I think maybe like that, so I've got 3 and 3 and 3, so then that's kind of a nice kind of F shape. Now this is where I can show you how this is good, because we've set it up in a parametric way, because we can go to the MoText object and now we can change this to another letter, say like T, and it should automatically update. It doesn't automatically update initially. You can kind of uncheck and check this back on. Okay, but let's go on the front view, you can see that the reason we're not seeing all of it is because our cloner object isn't big enough. You could change this easily, probably by changing this to 20 as well. So we've got much more cloners, and then we can decide, you know, how we want to line that up. Okay, so that means what happens when we apply all the animation to our cloner, we can just change the letter on the number quite easily. The only thing I would say is that at this scale, with cubes this big, if you have an object that's got curves to it, let's just say like a number 5, see, it doesn't quite work. Kind of move stuff around. I guess that doesn't look too bad, but you could make the cube smaller, you could fill it out more and get that kind of more voxel kind of effect. But let's go back. Let's just change this back to our F. There we go, and get that cloner set up where we had it before, kind of that sort of position. Okay, so the first bit of animation I'm going to add is a formula effector. So with the cloner selected, let's go up to MoGraph, effector, and formula effector. Now the first thing you're noticing is this is kind of going a bit crazy and going in the wrong direction. If we play this, it's doing all sorts of things. This has just made me notice there's one thing I want to change, which I should have done at the beginning, which is setting up our project settings. So if we go to project settings, I just want to change this to 25 frames per second and 100 frames long. And that means we're going to create a 4-second loop. So this isn't exactly going the way we want it to, and it doesn't look anything like the final render, and I'll show you how to get around that. Under the formula, let's go to the parameter, and we'll uncheck position. All we want to do is affect scale, and I want to change the scale to -0.5. And if we press play, you can see at the minute it's scaling from front to back, and the way I had it in my final render was it's actually scaling from top to bottom, and that's because of the way in which the cloner kind of hierarchy works. So the way around this is probably to actually rotate the cloner. So let's just get our cloner and just rotate that through 90 degrees, so -90, and then I'm just going to change 2 settings. I'm going to change this to 3 and this to 20, so I'm just swapping these around, and now you can see we're scaling from top to bottom, or bottom to top. If we wanted to go top to bottom, then we could just change this to +90. Okay, so that's that, and then I'm going to change a couple of settings just to kind of refine this motion. What I'm going to do first is select the formula, and then under the effector variables, I'm going to take these down to 0.5 each to kind of slow down that formula effect. And then I don't want these getting so small and so big, and you can change that here in the min and max values. So maximum is currently 100. I'm going to set this to 80. So it's not getting as big as it was. And then for the minimum, I'm going to set that to 40. So you see now we've got just a more slight version of the animation, because I'm going to add additional animation on top of this, which is also going to affect the scale. So I want to try and avoid them kind of crossing into each other a ton. Okay. So with the cloner selected, let's go to MoGraph effector shader, and under the parameter tab, I'm going to leave the scale at 0.5. If I play that through, you'll see it's kind of adding an overall effect on at the moment. So we want this kind of random kind of scale effect going on. So we're going to do that by going to the shading tab and adding a noise. Okay, and then in the noise tab, I'm going to keep the noise as just the standard noise. I'm going to change the scale to 500 and the animation speed to 1. And then the loop period, I'm going to change that to 4, because our animation is 4 seconds long. That's what I was saying earlier. It's important to set the frames per second, because the formula likes to work in seconds. If you've got an odd amount, it won't necessarily loop correctly, especially when you're halving the speed. It needs to be an even number. And then with the loop period, you want that to be set for the right amount of seconds. So 4 seconds for that. And then if we play that through, see, it's not having like a great deal of effect. So what I'm going to do is up the contrast on here, and you can see it affecting the objects. Let's move this up to something like 75. if I play that through, see, you can now see where it's going white, that is actually where it's affecting the color as well, which is something we need to turn off because we're going to affect the color using another effector later. So let's go down to select on the shader, under parameter, color mode, effector color. We want to turn that off. So that's all of the shader effector added as well. And then the only other effectors I added was some randomness on this top corner and this bottom corner. I did that with a random effector. So let's go to MoGraph effector random, and I'm just going to change this to, I'm just going to change the position, so 10, 10 and 10. And for the fall off, I'm going to get a linear field. So let's just shrink this linear field down and just rotate it around. I want to affect this top corner first. I've done that the wrong way around. Let's rotate it the other way around. Okay, we'll put that about there. So I just want to kind of, roughen up this top edge, and I actually might, I don't know if I did this in the original, but I might just change the scale on these randomly a little bit as well. Okay, and then I did the same on the bottom corner. So I'm just going to duplicate that linear field, bring it under the random, just to kind of keep it neat and tidy. Then in random, under fall off, going to add that second linear field. Okay, we'll drag that down and we'll rotate that in the opposite direction. So that's just going to affect those few at the bottom. Okay, and you'll notice that now the top half isn't being affected. So with the fall offs, it kind of works like Photoshop with layers. So you want to kind of add this one to that one. So let's put in add, and so now we've got the top half being affected and that bottom half being affected. So now that's kind of the basis of the animation. We could just tweak these a little bit. Maybe we don't need that to be so dramatic, but it's just to kind of add a little bit of variation. But now we've got that done, we want to add in our random colors. So I'm just going to quickly show you how to do that using the normal Cinema 4D materials, and then I'll go through the process of just putting it into Octane. So with the cloner selected, let's get another MoGraph effector, a random. And for this one, I'm just going to change the name of this to random color, just to keep track. Turn off position, and all we're going to use within this one is the effector color. So now we get all of these random colors that are assigned by the effector. Now we can use that information to put our own colors on. So I've shown a few times how to do this in Octane, but I thought maybe it's worthwhile showing how to do it in normal Cinema 4D materials, and then I'll show Octane. Okay, so let's just create a new Cinema 4D material, and I'll drag that onto the cloner. And then under color, we're going to select MoGraph color shader. Now all that does is it's bringing in all the information that we had in the that's being transferred from the random effector, and now it's applying that within the color shader. Now you can do kind of a quick and dirty version of getting some random colors by just changing this color up here and then bringing down the mix value, and see now we've got like a lot of different shades of blue, for instance. Or the other way of doing it is, let's just reset this back to white. We click on this texture tab again. I'm going to bring in a colorizer. Okay, so if we go into the colorizer, you'll see the texture color shader that we used is embedded within this, and now that color shader is being affected by this gradient from the colorizer. So I twirl this down, and we could load a preset, we could load a gradient, and now it's pulling all of the colors from that gradient into our object. Okay, so then we've got our random selection of colors, and I think this is the gradient I started off with for my final render. But what we'll do is we'll take this into Octane, and I'll apply all the materials in Octane. Okay, now I've got the Octane Live Viewer window open, and all I've done is imported the scene from my last tutorial, with the couple of lights, an Octane sky using that what was it called, Car Studio 2 from the Pixel Lab, and then the same camera settings that I had roughly as the last one, so the same response, same exposure, same gamma. So if you've done the last tutorial, I'll put a link above where I kind of describe how I set that up and set up the studio, so I don't need to go through all that again, okay? But what we want to do is set up the materials for this F. So let's just press the render button. Now I want to change this to path tracing, and I don't know if I've described this before about on the fin lens tab on the camera, there's this depth of field. I've got this set to 5 for the aperture, so to change the focus within this viewer window you can click this tab and then click anywhere that you want to focus on. So now we're focusing on that foreground area, okay? What I'll do next is we'll set up this material for the background. Remember to uncheck this, because if you don't uncheck that, whenever you click on this screen it will change the area of focus. I'll actually lock this, and we'll change the scale to 0.5 just so it views it's fully in view and we can move it around the screen. I might just center that up a little tiny bit more. Okay, so let's actually I'll also change these settings really low. Let's change it to something like 500, 10, do the GI clamp to maybe 1, put adaptive sampling on. That'll just help with the speed of the rendering. Okay, so for the background, let's create a glossy material. For this, I've written down the colors that I used for the background, and that's 326, 39 and 83. So that's this pink. For the roughness, I just put this up to like 0.2, so I've got like a bit of roughness on there, and I'll add that to the studio. Okay, so that's our pink background. Now our materials don't look quite right at the moment in Octane because they're just the normal Cinema 4D materials. We want to recreate this but with an Octane material. So let's go to materials, we'll do another glossy material, and I'll rename this one Stage, and we'll just call this one F. And I've done this before in previous tutorials, but what we're going to do is just, I'll apply this one to, oh no, not to the studio, I'll apply it to the F, so it's all white at the moment. And what we're going to do is bring in a MoGraph color shader, like the color shader we used in the normal Cinema 4D material, and then as we did in the Cinema 4D material, we're going to add in a gradient. So it's kind of doing exactly the same thing, just this one I kind of like the visual way that it's set up. So automatically it's set, the gradient is set from black to white, but we want to grab the same colors that we had in the final render. So I used one of these presets, I think this flame preset, but I didn't actually pick all of these colors, so I can get rid of a few. Let's get rid of the black, this very dark blue, and a couple of these. So I just want to use these colors. I want to spread these out evenly, so if you right click on this, you can then say distribute knots, and it will evenly space those out. So then now we've got that color set up. Now I just want to add some roughness onto this F here, so I'm going to do that using a image texture. Let's go to image texture, and then we'll grab the image. I've got it on my desktop. Here we go. It's BW10, so it's just a grunge map. So that's just to add a bit of roughness onto each of our letters, each of our cubes. I go to 1. You can see how that's kind of bouncing off. I'm not too sure if my focus is looking quite good, so I'm just going to take this right down, just so we get a bit more. Whoa. Okay, sorry, my computer wigged out for a second, so I've just gone back to the setup that we had. So now we've just got that roughness on there, and then I'm going to set this to cubic actually. And that's basically our final setup. And now that we can render through that animation, I'll just put this back to 0.5. Because we set this up parametrically, we can change this to let's say like a number, for instance. There we go, and then we've got that updated animation automatically. Then you can set this to render out. So here again is my final render. I hope you found this tutorial interesting. I'm going to try and make my way through the 36 days of type that I didn't cover in tutorials so far. Mainly the ones I think have kind of interesting techniques in, or interesting little tips and tricks that you might be able to use in your own projects. But that's it for this one for now, and I will see you again soon. Please stay safe. Bye.